Hello, so this is your assignment tutorial. So you're required to write a 2,000 word report, and this constitutes 100% of the weighting or the grade for the module because the portfolio is a pass or fail only. So you are asked to write a report as a student on placement. So your supervisor has asked you to write a report evaluating assessment practice, analysing how systemic approaches can inform your work, and recommending an intervention. So the contexts for the report are that you may choose to be based within Worcestershire Support Services, so that is a voluntary sector agency, and you may choose either Zainab and Jack case or the Mary Khan case. Alternatively, you may choose a local authority setting, and again you may choose either children and families, so Zainab and Jack Khan, or adults, which would be Mary Khan's case. So if we're thinking about writing reports, and reports are a very common feature of social work practice, there are certain features of reports that are identified by Healy and Mulholland. The first is about clarity of information sources. So this is recognising that you need to be clear about the source of the information that you're including in the report. You are required to form an opinion, but that you need to be clear on the basis of which this opinion has been formed. So exploring the strengths and the limits of the information that you've got and the evidence base. So the second feature of reports is a logical order. In reports, it's really important that you help the audience through, or the reader through, the report, and that you structure it through use of things like headings and subheadings, which you don't tend to do with essays, so it's quite different in that respect. The third feature is a good coverage of relevant material. So this is about being clear about the terms of reference, so what the purpose of the report is, why you've been asked to write it, and who you're writing it for. And lastly, brevity. So reports, it's really important that you show the ability to summarise and write concisely and in clear language, which again might be a little bit different to writing an essay. So check your writing for any additional waffly language, and keep it very clear and very to the point. So in terms of the structure of your report, there are some standard structures that you can see within some of the literature. So a generic structure for a report might be an introduction, a context, what happened, methods or procedures, what did you do, an analysis, so how can you make sense of the situation, and recommendations and conclusions. Based on the evidence, what do you propose? It might be that you choose a different structure for your report, and that's absolutely fine. It's whatever is helpful for you and whatever you believe will be helpful for the reader. So thinking about writing a report, the audience is really, really important. So you're writing this report for your supervisor. So really you're trying to persuade your supervisor of your understanding and knowledge and ability to evaluate good assessment practice, your ability to apply systemic approaches to practice, and your ability to choose from a range of approaches or interventions, and make a good recommendation of what intervention might be helpful within that particular case and with that particular context in mind. So in terms of how you approach this assignment, it may be that you have a particular case, so Mary Khan or Zainab and Jack Khan, or a particular context, so voluntary independent private sector provider or local authority provider. Or it may be that you have a particular intervention that you'd like to focus on, in which case you then might have a think about, well, actually which case and which context fits more appropriately. If you're approaching it from a case or context perspective, if you, for example, particularly want to write about Zainab and Jack from a local authority perspective, it may be that defines what intervention you're going to look at. So it really depends. You can approach it in either way, really. So now we're going to look at the learning outcomes. Really important that you address all the learning outcomes within your assignments. So this is the first one in this assignment, but the second in the module. So you are required to synthesize the theoretical roots, evidence base and efficacy of intervention methods. So you're required to choose at least one, and one might be more than enough. If you think about the word count that you've got, you might choose more than one. That's up to you, but you need to make sure that for at least one intervention method you bring together, synthesize the theoretical roots, evidence base and efficacy of it. And obviously this is a contentious area. We've kind of looked at that in terms of approaches to theory and evidence-based practice. So there are some approaches that are considered to have a much stronger evidence base than others. So for example, cognitive behavioural practice, task-centred practice. There are some intervention methods that don't, and I guess sometimes that's because it's very difficult to research certain approaches. Also, the debate about actually whether there is or should be a gold standard it is open to quite a lot of debate. So you might want to engage in some of that debate in relation to the evidence base for the method that you choose. So moving on to learning outcome 3. So learning outcome 3 is to evaluate the application of assessment in current social work practice. If we're thinking about assessment practice, you might want to think about some of the models that we've learnt about. So there's the Smale and Tewson's 3 models, procedural, questioning, exchange models. You may choose to consider those. You may choose to consider the 5-stage model that we've looked at a number of times within the module. You may choose to apply a systemic approach to assessment, which will also address the next learning outcome. So there are a number of ways. You may also seek to kind of evaluate the application of assessment in the particular setting or context that you've chosen. So thinking about assessment within a voluntary independent private sector provider as opposed to assessment within the local authority. There can be different relationships with confidentiality and consent, which you may choose to bring in as well. So there are lots and lots of different ways that you can address this learning outcome. The important thing is that you do some reading and that you apply some of the literature. And the final learning outcome is to critically analyse how systemic approaches can be used to inform practice. So it may be, as mentioned, that you consider this in relation to assessment practice, recognition that holistic assessment is likely to be underpinned by systemic ideas, and that we can't understand an individual without understanding the network, the system that they're based in. Or it might be that you look at how systemic tools can support practice, so genograms, ecomaps, some of those things that we've looked at within the module. It may be that you look at how a systemic approach might inform your plan or your approach with either Zainab or Mary. So those are your learning outcomes for the assignment, and these are the grading criteria that are used for all of your assignments at level 7. So you'll notice here that you'll be graded on how well you have achieved the learning outcomes, the relevance of your assignment to the task that's been given, the knowledge and understanding that you've shown, the application of knowledge and understanding to practice, your levels of analysis and critical evaluation. So, there you're really looking at bringing in multiple sources, multiple perspectives, weighing up kind of the benefits, the limitations of the various ideas that you're talking about within your assignment. The organisation, structure and use of research-informed evidence. And last but not least, anti-oppressive perspectives. So it's really important within all your assignments that you address anti-oppressive perspectives. So if we think very simply about anti-oppressive practice, it's about recognising that oppression exists within our society, and that as social workers we should be aiming to mitigate the effects of oppression. And so it's important to think about that in the context of your assignment. So thinking about that in the context of assessment that you'll be writing about. So how can assessment practice seek to minimise the impact of oppression? And in terms of the approach that you choose, the intervention that you're writing about, how does that relate to anti-oppressive practice? If we think about some of the values of the profession around partnership and empowerment, collaboration, those things are quite often features of some of the approaches that we've learned about. So making sure that you include that in your analysis of the approach as well. And these are the references really regarding report writing that I've used to inform the presentation today. Just in terms of reading, read as much as you can possibly do in preparation for this assignment. The reading list is separated into sections, which should help you find the section that's relevant to the approach that you want to choose, although like the set text and there's some of the theory books that will cover all of the major approaches in social work. We do actively encourage students, and we will consider that within our grading of how students have used the reading list. So do access some of those resources on the reading list, but do obviously go out and do some further reading. If you're looking at the evidence base, research that's been done about the approach maybe that you're choosing, it's likely that you're going to be accessing some journals for that. So that's the end of your presentation today.